Your boss would know you're searching for a new job the second you think about it. That secret crush you have, they'd feel it every time you glance their way. And imagine a world where no politician could ever tell a lie without their own mind screaming the truth to everyone listening. In a telepathic world, your innermost thoughts are an open book, whether you like it or not. The entire concept of a poker face would vanish from human interaction forever. Every unspoken annoyance, every fleeting judgment, every deeply held belief would be instantly perceivable by those around you. Number 11. Your inner monologue is now a public broadcast. Imagine walking down the street. Right now, your thoughts are your own private sanctuary. You might be idly wondering what to have for dinner, replaying an awkward conversation, or silently judging someone's fashion sense. In a telepathic world, this private stream of consciousness becomes to varying degrees public. It's not necessarily like a loudspeaker blaring your every whim, but more like a constant, subtle feed that those around you can tune into or perhaps can't help but overhear. The immediate effect is the death of unspoken privacy. That little tune stuck in your head. Your neighbor on the bus is now humming it too, maybe with a shared thought of mild irritation. That fleeting, unkind thought about a colleague's presentation. They felt it, a flicker of your disdain passing through their own mind. There would be no hiding your boredom in a meeting, no feigning interest when you're actually thinking about your weekend plans. Every social interaction would be layered with this undercurrent of raw, unfiltered thought. Consider the sheer mental noise. In a crowded space, it wouldn't just be the sound of voices, traffic, and music, but a cacophony of thoughts, anxieties, plans, memories, and random mental chatter from hundreds of people. Individuals might develop mental shields or filters, but the effort required to maintain them could be exhausting. Some might find it unbearable, seeking solitude, not just from physical presence, but from mental intrusion. The concept of personal space would take on an entirely new dimension, extending to the sanctity of one's own mind. You might find yourself unintentionally overhearing deeply personal or traumatic thoughts from strangers, creating a constant, unsolicited emotional burden. The sheer volume of information could be overwhelming, making concentration on individual tasks incredibly difficult without new coping mechanisms. Casual, unthinking judgments we all make would be laid bare, potentially leading to constant, low-level social friction or, conversely, a rapid reevaluation of how we think about others. Number 10. Dating becomes brutally, uncomfortably honest. The dating world, as we know it, relies heavily on kibed self-presentation, unspoken cues, and a fair amount of guesswork. Telepathy would rip all of that away. Picture a first date. As you sit across from someone, you'd instantly know their genuine first impression of you. Not just what they say. Their fleeting thoughts about your anecdote, their level of attraction, their anxieties about the date, all of it would be an open channel. There would be no wondering if they're just being polite, you'd know. This direct line to another's thoughts could accelerate intimacy for some. Shared attractions would be immediately confirmed, leading to a rapid progression if both parties are aligned. Misunderstandings based on misread signals would largely disappear. If someone isn't interested, you'd know it clearly, and without the painful ambiguity of mixed messages or ghosting. Rejection would be instantaneous and undeniable, felt as a direct mental rebuff. There would be no letting someone down easy with polite phrases. They'd experience your lack of interest or your reasons directly. However, the lack of any filter could also make dating incredibly fraught. Insecurities would be broadcast. If you're worried about how you look or if you're good enough, your date would perceive those anxieties, which could in turn affect their perception of you. Awkward silences would be filled not with nervous glances, but with the loud internal monologues of both individuals, perhaps critiquing the silence itself. Past relationship baggage, fears, and even fleeting comparisons to ex-partners might surface unintentionally in one person's thoughts, immediately perceived by the other. The getting to know you phase, often a delicate dance of revealing information at a comfortable pace, would be compressed into an intense, immediate information dump. Building trust might become harder if every fleeting doubt or critical thought your partner has is instantly known, even if they wouldn't normally voice it or act upon it. The romance of mystery and gradual discovery could be lost, replaced by an overwhelming and perhaps unwelcome transparency. Number 9. White lies vanish, and so does social lubrication. Think about all the small, often harmless, untruths we tell throughout the day. Your new haircut looks great, when you secretly think it's a disaster. Sorry, I'm late. Traffic was terrible, when you actually overslept. That was a delicious meal when it was merely okay. These white lies are often used to avoid hurting feelings, to maintain social harmony, or to sidestep minor conflicts. In a telepathic world, these social niceties would become impossible. The moment you think, "Oh, that's not a good look," the person you're talking to would perceive it, regardless of the complimentary words leaving your mouth. The discrepancy between spoken word and actual thought would be glaring. This could lead to a society that is, on the surface, incredibly blunt. If someone asks for your opinion, they would receive your unfiltered, instantaneous mental reaction. Compliments would be rare and deeply valued, as they would be undeniably genuine. Criticisms, however, would be constant and unavoidable. The absence of these social buffers could make everyday interactions tense and exhausting. Imagine a work environment where colleagues constantly perceive each other's minor irritations, judgments about performance, or even boredom during conversations. Family gatherings could become minefields of unspoken, but clearly felt, grievances and opinions. Could society adapt to this level of raw honesty? Perhaps new social norms would evolve, where people consciously try to control their initial reactive thoughts, or where there's a greater acceptance of the fact that not all thoughts are kind or considered. However, the effort to constantly police one's own mind in the presence of others could be immense. Simple transactions like buying coffee could become awkward if the barista perceives your fleeting annoyance at the queue, or you perceive their weariness. The very fabric of politeness, often built on slight omissions or gentle misdirections, would be torn apart, forcing a new, more direct and potentially harsher mode of human interaction. Number 8. Classrooms transform into mind mells of instant learning. The traditional model of education, involving lectures, reading, and individual study, would be turned on its head by universal telepathy. Imagine a teacher being able to directly transmit complex concepts, not just through words, but as fully formed understandings into the minds of their students. The student struggling with a mathematical formula could suddenly get it, as the teacher projects the logical steps and the underlying principles. Learning could become incredibly efficient. Teacher would also instantly know when students are confused, bored, or not grasping the material. There would be no need for students to raise their hands with questions they might be too shy to ask. Their confusion would be a clear signal to the teacher. Explanations could be tailored in real time to the specific difficulties each student is experiencing. Group projects could become truly collaborative, with team members sharing ideas and insights, building on each other's thoughts in a fluid, dynamic way. Students could learn from each other just as effectively as from the teacher, with knowledge and understanding flowing between minds. The brightest students could share their insights, lifting the comprehension level of the entire class. However, this mental openness in an educational setting also presents challenges. Students unable to shield their thoughts might find the classroom a distracting storm of other students' anxieties, daydreams, or even answers during a test. Speaking of tests, how would assessments work? If a teacher can perceive a student's understanding directly, traditional exams might become obsolete. But what about evaluating individual effort, if knowledge can be so easily shared or absorbed from others? The pressure to keep up mentally could be intense, especially for students who learn at a different pace. Furthermore, a teacher's own biases or frustrations, however fleeting, might be perceived by students, potentially affecting their confidence or motivation. The sheer volume of mental input from a class of 30 students could also be overwhelming for the teacher, requiring immense concentration and filtering abilities to manage effectively and provide individual mental attention. The very definition of study might change from solitary effort to a more passive, receptive state, or an active mental engagement with a shared thought space. Number 7. Crime scenes scream with 1,000 silent witnesses. The world of crime and justice would be irrevocably altered. Consider a crime being committed. If the perpetrator is telepathic, their intentions, their actions, their sensations during the act, fear, anger, triumph, would be broadcast, at least to some extent, to anyone telepathic nearby. There would be no unseen crimes if a telepath is within range. A victim's terror, pain, and their perception of the attacker would also be a powerful mental signal. Investigations would take on a completely new form. Instead of relying solely on physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, which is often flawed, investigators could potentially access the mental residue of a crime scene. Did the perpetrator touch this object? Their mental imprint might linger. More significantly, interviewing witnesses, victims, and suspects would be transformed. A detective wouldn't need to decipher body language or look for tells. They would perceive the truth, the deception, or the confusion directly from the person's mind. A suspect claiming innocence while their mind replays the crime would be instantly exposed. Alibis could be verified or debunked with mental certainty. The need for prolonged interrogations might vanish. Courtrooms would be unrecognizable. A jury might not just hear testimony. They might experience a cribbed mental replay from key individuals. The defendant's guilt or innocence, at least in terms of their own internal knowledge and memory, would be an open book to a telepathic judge or jury. This could lead to near-perfect conviction rates for the guilty. However, this raises profound questions. What about thought crimes? If someone thinks about committing a crime but doesn't act on it, is that punishable? How do you ensure the privacy of innocent thoughts during a mental investigation? Could memories be manipulated or misinterpreted, even if accessed telepathically? The very concept of beyond a reasonable doubt might shift if doubt itself is harder to come by in the face of direct mental evidence. Furthermore, the mental toll on those working in law enforcement, constantly exposed to the darkest aspects of human thought and criminal minds, would be immense. And what if a criminal is exceptionally skilled at controlling their thoughts, or if their mental landscape is so chaotic, it's hard to decipher? Number 6. Political speeches get a real-time fact check from the speaker's own mind. The landscape of politics and governance would undergo a seismic shift. Imagine a politician giving a speech, making promises, or outlining policies. In a telepathic world, the audience wouldn't just hear the carefully crafted words, They would also perceive the politicians' underlying intentions, their true beliefs, and whether they actually believe what they're saying. If a politician makes a promise they have no intention of keeping, that insincerity would be palpable to every telepath listening. If they are misrepresenting facts, their own knowledge of the truth would contradict their spoken words, creating a clear mental dissonance. This could lead to a new era of political transparency, or at least an end to overt deception. Voters could make decisions based not on rhetoric, but on the perceived genuine convictions and plans of their leaders. Hidden agendas would be incredibly difficult to maintain. International diplomacy would be transformed. Negotiators would instantly know the true position and red lines of the other side, potentially leading to quicker resolutions, or conversely, immediate standstills, if true intentions are irreconcilable. The power of propaganda and misinformation would be severely diminished if the disseminators themselves don't believe it, or if their true manipulative intent is clear. However, this constant mental scrutiny could also make governance incredibly difficult. Politicians are often required to make difficult choices with no perfect outcomes, or to compromise. If their every doubt, their internal deliberations, and their necessary concessions to opposing views are broadcast, it could undermine public confidence or make them appear weak or indecisive. Could anyone with a normal human mix of ambitions, doubts, and occasional less than noble thoughts survive in such a mentally transparent political arena? It might select for leaders with an unusual degree of conviction, or an unusual ability to believe their own rhetoric, or perhaps those with very bland, uncontroversial inner lives. Pressure to have perfectly aligned thoughts and words at all times would be immense. Furthermore, populist leaders who thrive on emotional connection might find their influence amplified if their strong emotions resonate directly with the populace, regardless of the substance of their ideas. Spontaneous, unfiltered thoughts from leaders during moments of crisis could also trigger widespread panic or instability. Number 5. The global economy runs on pure, unfiltered intent. Business transactions, negotiations, and the entire functioning of the economy would be reshaped. The concept of a poker face in a business deal would be obsolete. When negotiating a contract, each party would be aware of the other's bottom line, their true willingness to compromise, and any hidden clauses or intentions they might have in mind. This could lead to far more efficient and fair negotiations, as bluffing and deception would be largely ineffective. Deals could be struck much faster when all cards are quite literally on the mental table. In the workplace, team dynamics could be revolutionized. Managers would instantly know if their employees understand instructions. If they are feeling overwhelmed or if they have concerns they are hesitant to voice. True collaboration could flourish as colleagues share ideas and solutions telepathically, leading to increased productivity and innovation. Job interviews would be a completely different experience. A candidate's skills, experience, and even their personality and work ethic would be far more transparent to a telepathic interviewer. Companies could build teams with an almost perfect synergy of minds. But this mental openness in the economic sphere also brings challenges. What happens to competitive advantage if your company's strategic plans and innovations are easily perceived by rivals? Corporate espionage could take on a new, insidious form: mental theft of ideas. The stock market, often driven by sentiment and speculation, could become incredibly volatile if the collective anxieties or optimism of traders are amplified and instantly shared. Advertising would also need to adapt. If consumers can perceive the manipulative intent behind a campaign, or if they know a product doesn't live up to its claims because the marketers themselves know it, traditional advertising models would collapse. Instead, value might be placed on genuine product quality and transparent business practices. Employee morale could also be tricky. If a boss is silently worrying about impending layoffs, that anxiety would permeate the entire office. The pressure to always have positive or productive thoughts in a work environment could be a new form of stress. Number 4. Mental health. Shared burdens or overwhelming noise. The experience of mental health, both for individuals and society, would be profoundly different. On one hand, telepathy could foster unprecedented levels of empathy and understanding. Someone suffering from depression or anxiety would no longer have to struggle to articulate their pain. Those around them could perceive it directly, perhaps leading to more immediate and compassionate support. The isolation that often accompanies mental illness could be broken down if others can truly feel a sliver of what an individual is going through. Therapists could gain a much deeper and more immediate understanding of their patients' minds, potentially leading to more effective treatments. Support groups could achieve a new level of connection and shared experience. However, the constant influx of others' emotions and thoughts could also be a significant threat to mental well-being. Imagine being an empathic person constantly bombarded by the anxieties, fears, sadness, and stresses of everyone in your vicinity. Could lead to emotional overload, burnout, or the development of new forms of anxiety disorders related to this constant mental exposure. Individuals might struggle to differentiate their own feelings from the second-hand emotions absorbed from others. The stigma around certain thoughts, if they are now perceivable, could worsen. For example, if dark or intrusive thoughts, which are a common human experience, are suddenly audible to others, it could lead to shame and misjudgment, even if those thoughts are never acted upon. There's also the question of mental privacy in therapy. While a therapist might gain deeper insight, would a patient feel safe if their every thought, even those they are not ready to share, is accessible? Coping mechanisms would be essential. Perhaps society would develop techniques for mental shielding or emotional filtering, but the baseline level of mental exposure would still be far higher than anything we experience now. For those already prone to conditions like paranoia, a telepathic world could be a living nightmare where it feels like everyone truly is listening to and judging their thoughts. The definition of a healthy mind might need to be reevaluated in a world where thoughts are no longer entirely private property. Number 3. Creativity explodes into collaborative thought. Forms. Art, music, literature, and all forms of creative expression would enter a new dimension. Imagine a group of musicians not just playing their instruments in harmony, but also weaving their creative intentions, their emotional interpretations, and their melodic ideas together in a shared mental space. The result could be compositions of incredible complexity and emotional depth, created spontaneously and organically. Writers could collaborate on stories by directly merging their imaginative worlds and narrative streams. Visual artists could project mental images, allowing others to experience their artistic vision directly, or even co-create vast dynamic mental artworks. The very nature of art could change. Instead of a finished product, like a painting or a book, art could become a live, shared telepathic experience. Performance art could involve the audience not just observing, but participating in a collective mental construct guided by the artist. New art forms unimaginable to us now could emerge, based entirely on the direct transmission and shaping of thought, emotion, and sensation. Inspiration could become a contagious force, with ideas sparking and spreading rapidly through a community of telepathic creators. The process of learning artistic techniques could also be accelerated, as a master could transmit not just the how-to, but the feel and intuition of their craft directly to an apprentice. But would this hyperconnectivity also lead to a homogenization of creativity? If ideas are so easily shared and absorbed, would individual artistic voices become diluted in a kind of creative groupthink. The pressure to conform to popular mental trends or styles might stifle more eccentric or challenging visions. Where does copyright or ownership of an idea reside if it emerges from a collective mental process? Perhaps the concept of individual authorship would become less important, replaced by a focus on collaborative creation. There's also the possibility that the sheer influx of others' creative thoughts could be overwhelming for some artists, making it difficult to find their own unique mental space to create. The raw, unfiltered nature of creative thought, often messy and non-linear, being exposed during its nascent stages, might also make some artists feel vulnerable or inhibit their willingness to explore unconventional ideas. Number 2. The nature of secrets and trust changes forever. The very concept of a secret, as something known only to oneself or a select few, would be fundamentally challenged in a telepathic world. If your thoughts can be perceived, then keeping something truly hidden would require immense mental discipline, perhaps to the point of being almost impossible for most people. Small secrets, like a surprise party, would be incredibly difficult to orchestrate. Larger secrets, those that carry weight and consequence, personal shames, undisclosed illnesses, past mistakes, would be constantly at risk of exposure, or might simply be ambient knowledge among those close to you. This erosion of secrecy would have a profound impact on trust. On one hand, trust might become less necessary in some contexts, or at least its nature would change. You wouldn't need to trust that someone is telling the truth if you can perceive their thoughts directly. Relationships could be built on a foundation of absolute, unvarnished transparency. There would be no hidden betrayals, no secret resentments, festering unspoken. All would be laid bare. This could lead to relationships that are incredibly strong, forged in the crucible of total honesty, or it could make long-term relationships incredibly difficult to maintain, as every fleeting doubt or negative thought about a partner becomes known. On the other hand, the ability to choose to share a thought, to consciously open a part of your mind to another, could become the new hallmark of deep trust. If general telepathy is like a low-level broadcast, then focused, intentional mind-to-mind sharing might be a more intimate act than any physical one. The secrets that remain might be those that individuals successfully shield, and the act of choosing to lower that shield for someone would be a profound gesture. However, the constant awareness that others might be perceiving your unshielded thoughts could lead to a pervasive sense of vulnerability. Societies might develop strict social codes around mental eavesdropping or respecting mental boundaries, but the potential for intrusion would always be there. The very idea of a private life would need to be redefined when the mind is no longer a private space. Number 1. Humanity faces the dawn of a collective consciousness. Over generations, if all humans are telepathic, the implications could stretch far beyond individual interactions and societal structures, potentially leading to a fundamental change in what it means to be human. If thoughts, emotions, knowledge, and experiences are constantly flowing between individuals, the boundaries of the self could begin to blur. Imagine a community where shared understanding and empathy are so profound that individuals begin to operate less as distinct entities and more as nodes in a larger interconnected mental network. This wouldn't necessarily be a hive mind in the science fiction sense of lost individuality, at least not initially. Instead, it might manifest as an unprecedented level of collective intelligence and problem-solving ability. Humanity facing global challenges like climate change or disease could pool its mental resources, sharing insights and perspectives instantaneously across cultures and languages, leading to solutions that are currently unimaginable Cultural differences might erode as shared understanding deepens, replaced by a more unified global human identity. The transmission of knowledge and skills from one generation to the next could become seamless, leading to an exponential acceleration of progress. However, the long-term trajectory could also raise profound questions about individuality. If one's thoughts and experiences are constantly merging with the collective pool, what happens to unique perspectives, to dissent, to the very notion of a singular I? Could a form of groupthink emerge on a planetary scale, making humanity less adaptable if that collective thought pattern leads down a wrong path? Evolution of consciousness itself could take a new turn. Perhaps individual consciousness as we know it would be a transitional phase, eventually giving way to a larger distributed consciousness. This entity, if it could be called that, might have goals and perspectives alien to our current understanding of individual human motivation. The very definition of humanity might evolve into something new, a species bound not just by shared biology, but by a constantly interwoven mental landscape, for better or for worse, fundamentally and forever changed.